From Mary Chestnut's Civil War by Mary Chestnut. April 7, 1861. Today things seem to have settled down a little. One can but hope still. Lincoln or Seward have made such silly advances and then far sillier drawings back. There may be a chance for peace after all. Things are happening so fast. My husband has been made an aide-de-camp of General Beauregard. 3 hours ago we were quietly packing to go home. The convention has adjourned. Now he tells me the attack upon Fort Sumter may begin tonight. Depends upon Anderson and the fleet outside. The Herald says that this show of war outside the bar is intended for Texas. John Manning came in with his sword and red sash, pleased as a boy-to-be or Beauregard's staff while the row goes on. He has gone with Wigfall to Captain Hartstein with instructions. Mr. Chestnut is finishing a report he had to make to the convention. Mrs. Hayne called. She had, she said, but one feeling, pity for those who are not here. Jack Preston, Willie Alston, the take-life-easies as they are called, with John Green, the big brave, have gone down to the island, volunteered as privates. 700 men were sent over. Ammunition wagons rumbling along the streets all night. Anderson burning blue lights, signs and signals for the fleet outside, I suppose. Today at dinner there was no allusion to things as they stand in Charleston Harbor. There was an undercurrent of intense excitement. There could not have been a more brilliant circle. In addition to our usual quartet, Judge Withers, Langdon Cheeves, and Trescott, our 2 governors dined with us, Means and Manning. These men all talked so delightfully. For once in my life I listened. That over, business began. In earnest, Governor Means rummaged a sword and red sash from somewhere and brought it for Colonel Chestnut, who had gone to demand the surrender of Fort Sumter. And now, patience. We must wait. Why did that green goose Anderson go into Fort Sumter? Then everything began to go wrong. Now they have intercepted a letter from him urging them to let him surrender. He paints the horrors likely to ensue if they will not. He ought to have thought of all that before he put his head in the hole. April 12, 1861. Anderson will not capitulate. Yesterday was the merriest, maddest dinner we have had yet. Men were more audaciously wise and witty. We had an unspoken foreboding it was to be our last pleasant meeting. Mr. Miles dined with us today. Mrs. Henry King rushed in. "The news! I come for the latest news. All of the men of the King family are on the island," of which fact she seemed proud. While she was here, our peace negotiator or envoy came in. That is, Mr. Chestnut returned. His interview with Colonel Anderson had been deeply interesting, but was not inclined to be communicative. Wanted his dinner. Felt for Anderson. Had telegraphed to President Davis for instructions. What answer to give Anderson, etc., etc. He has gone back to Fort Sumter with additional instructions. When they were about to leave the wharf, A.H. Boykin sprang into the boat in great excitement, thought himself ill-used. A likelihood of fighting, and he to be left behind. I do not pretend to go to sleep. How can I? If Anderson does not accept terms, at 4, the orders are he shall be fired upon. I count 4. St. Michael chimes. I begin to hope. At 4:30, the heavy booming of a cannon. I sprang out of bed, and on my knees, prostrate, I prayed as I never prayed before. There was a sound of stir all over the house, pattering of feet in the corridor. All seemed hurrying one way. I put on my double gown and a shawl and went too. It was to the housetop. The shells were bursting. In the dark, I heard a man say, "Waste of ammunition." I knew my husband was rowing about in a boat somewhere in that dark bay, and that the shells were roofing it over, bursting toward the fort. If Anderson was obstinate, he was to order the forts on our side to open fire. Certainly fire had begun. The regular roar of the cannon. There it was. And who could tell what each volley accomplished of death and destruction? The women were wild there on the housetop, prayers from the women and imprecations from the men, and then a shell would light up the scene. Tonight, they say, the forces are to attempt to land. The Harriet Lane had her wheelhouse smashed and put back to sea. We watched up there. Everybody wondered. Fort Sumter did not fire a shot. Today, Miles and Manning, colonels now, aides de Beauregard, dined with us. The latter hoped I would keep the peace. I give him only good words, for he was to be under fire all day and night in the bay, carrying orders, etc. Last night, or this morning, truly, up on the housetop I was so weak and weary I sat down on something that looked like a black stool. "Get up, you foolish woman, your dress is on fire," cried a man, and he put me out. It was a chimney, and the sparks caught my clothes. Susan Preston and Mr. Venable then came up, but my fire had been extinguished before it broke out into a regular blaze. Do you know, after all that noise and our tears and prayers, nobody has been hurt? Sound and fury, signifying nothing. A delusion and a snare. Somebody came in just now and reported Colonel Chestnut asleep on the sofa in General Beauregard's room. After 2 such nights, he must be so tired as to be able to sleep anywhere. April 13, 1861. Nobody hurt after all. How gay we were last night. Reaction after the dread of all the slaughter we thought those dreadful cannons were making such a noise and doing. Not even a battery, the worse for wear. Fort Sumter has been on fire. He has not yet silenced any of our guns. So the aides, still with swords and red sashes by way of uniform, tell us. But the sound of those guns makes regular meals impossible. None of us go to table, but tea trays pervade the corridors, going everywhere. Some of the anxious hearts lie on their beds and moan in solitary misery. Mrs. Wigfall and I solace ourselves with tea in my room. These women have all a satisfying faith. April 15, 1861. I did not know that one could live such days of excitement. They called, "Come out! There is a crowd coming!" A mob indeed, but it was headed by Colonels Chestnut and Manning. The crowd was shouting and showing these two as messengers of good news. They were escorted to Beauregard's headquarters. Fort Sumter had surrendered. Those up on the housetop shouted to us, "The fort is on fire!" That had been the story once or twice before. When we had calmed down, Colonel Chestnut, who had taken it all quietly enough, if anything more unruffled than usual in his serenity, told us how the surrender came about. Wigfall was with them on Morris Island when he saw the fire in the fort, jumped in a little boat, and with his handkerchief as a white flag, rowed over to Fort Sumter. Wigfall went in through a porthole. When Colonel Chestnut arrived shortly after and was received by the regular entrance, Colonel Anderson told him he had need to pick his way warily, for it was all mined. As far as I can make out, the fort surrendered to Wigfall. But it is all confusion. Our flag is flying there. Fire engines have been sent to put out the fire. Everybody tells you half of something and then rushes off to tell something else or to hear the last news.